because you remember the human who gave you that service. You remember the human that you met. You remember the spontaneity, basically, of all of those things. Hospitality is where the magic still happens.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. Richard Valtr didn't just build hotel software. He rewired what a stay could be. Before Mews, he was designing a 60-key hotel in Prague with a brazen brief. Make every guest feel like they were having a 5-star experience without needing to hire an army. He imagined stays like playlists, moods, moments, and choices, then realized that the industry lacked the pipes to power that sort of experience. So Richard built them. He built Mews, an open API PMS, as the backbone for personalization at scale. Today on the show, I'm joined by Richard, founder of Mews, hotelier-turned-systems architect, and one of the sharpest minds pushing hospitality past their heads and beds mindset. In this episode, we explore how the 60-key Prague experiment became a prototype for Mews, and whether a playlist for your stay can actually scale. We discuss why the real upside may live in the 16 waking hours of a guest stay, and how RevPAG, revenue per available guest, could nudge P&Ls beyond a bed-only mindset. We explore what changes when spend is posted to the guest, not the room, and whether that unlocks the ability for true personalization at the guest level to happen at scale. We discuss how personalization might honor your different modes. As a parent, a partner, a road warrior, your experience on every trip should be personalized to the purpose or intent of that trip. We explore what an open by default tech stack could enable, and what the future relationship between OTAs and operators might look like, and how it actually could benefit everyone a lot more than it does today. We discuss this and so much more. You're going to love my conversation with Richard, founder of Mews. Without further ado, friends, get ready to meet one of the sharpest minds, one of the most fun conversations I've had in a while, quite frankly. Get ready to meet Richard. All righty, Richard, we are live. Good sir. How are you doing this fine afternoon?
Fine. Yeah, it's a nice sunny day here in New York, so it feels like, if the sun's out, then everything's great.
Couldn't agree more. And then it's crisp, right? Fall has
Yeah,
officially arrived, and
100%.
it's just, I don't know. There's something about kind of that crisp weather that rolls in that, I don't know, just makes you feel a little bit more alive, or at least makes
Yeah.
me feel a little bit more optimistic.
I
Regardless
feel
of how
like
the day's gone.
that's one of the things, like, people always ask me like, about like why are Americans so much more optimistic about the world? And I'm like, because they just get so much more sunshine than Europeans. And I feel like that is one thing that nobody told me before moving to America. Like nobody really told me like just how sunny America actually is. So like
Huh.
it's very easy to then have like a sunny disposition if you're literally bathing in it every single day.
Yeah, unless you're in Seattle or Portland, right? They get like sun a couple times a couple of months out of the
But
year.
even
But
there, like there's those maps basically that you can see, and like I think
yeah,
Seattle, which is like notorious for being like incredibly rainy, I think there you still get more sunny days than you get in like Spain. So
yeah,
it's just like it's very
yeah.
like the change between the two continents is really remarkable.
I will say, I mean, there is something people, laugh all the time or joke all the time or roll their eyes all the time about like people that just talk about the weather. But it's like it actually is like an incredible like factor in most people's moods, right? Like
Yeah,
depending on, and yeah, people like different kinds of weather, sure, but like people are more optimistic when it's cooler and they get to put their jacket on for the first time and it's a sunny day, right? And it's not raining
yeah,
than they are when it's like hot and humid and like pouring rain, right? And so it is a big
100%.
fact. It's like maybe one of the few things that still like unite all of us, right? Is like, oh,
No,
how's the weather?
but I think like it's also it's one of these things when you think about like without getting like too into all of these things, but it's like there's so much of how to actually build like great stays and memorable stays and things like
Mm,
that, like where you should actually be thinking about like, well, okay, well, what's the environment like? Is it like is that guest actually going to have a great time because basically the weather's off, it's like,
yeah, yeah,
and then you kind of like start thinking about it, like it kind of gets you down this path of real like neurological programming, yeah, to basically be like, okay, well, how can we counteract some of those things, like what type of colors should we be actually designing our hotels with, like what should be the transition between the lobby all the way to the rooms that feel very non-tech. And I still
yeah.
feel like there's still so much that we can do to actually kind of really, really like bring the science of, well-being actually kind of into hotels that doesn't have a necessarily a tech angle, for example.
Well, and then there are, and this I promise listeners will be the last thing we talk about with respect to the weather. But there are then those the startups, right? Like the insurance companies. I forget what
Yeah,
there's a popular one right now, right? That everyone's talking about, where basically it's like you pay, and if it's rainy on your sunshine guaranteed weekend, you get a refund, right? Or
yeah.
it's crazy, or you can reschedule your trip, and like those are businesses that are designed because people really freaking care about the weather. And the weather is a huge factor in your daily life, let alone like your vacation.
But I also think like it's such a great example of all the different things that hoteliers can actually monetize. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
that's one of the things that like, because people just look at those things and they go like, well, who would pay to insure themselves against the weather? That's just something that's going to happen. And yet, lo and behold, basically, like there's entire like companies basically that can make like a huge amount of money for the hotel, basically precisely because of these things. And you kind of go like, well, how much further could we take this? And it's
Yeah.
just like the idea of insuring yourself against a bad time feels like something that you just wouldn't do, but like actually feels that, I think that this is where it still feels that we're in the first innings of really understanding like what hospitality and monetization of experiences actually is going to be like.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that this is, to get into kind of the Mews story, but like where we get so excited about like moving away from just monetizing the room. There's just so many other things, basically. If you just think about like capturing experiences, trying to kind of like almost guaranteeing like, or like thinking about what it means to actually guarantee a great time,
Yeah.
or a memorable experience, those types of things. And you just think about like what are the monetization techniques, and like the opportunities that like people who work in hospitality still have against, like still have in front of them. And I
Yeah.
just think it's, it still feels that we're in the first innings of really understanding just how profitable hospitality can be.
I actually want to come back to this because I think it's an incredible insight, and I think you guys are spot on. This is the conversation that needs to be had, across the industry. And I think this is really where the next frontier exists for innovation, for new service providers, for new tech providers
Yeah,
in this space. And there are several out there that are attempting this already. But let's come back to this. I want to hear about the Mews story, and really, Richard, you guys have exploded, and maybe you probably feel like this has been sort of like a natural progression over the last, I think it's been over 12
yeah,
years
yeah,
since you founded the
yeah,
company,
yeah.
but like
It takes like 12 years
it
to be
takes
an
like 12
overnight
years, yeah.
success, apparently. Yeah.
But from a observer's perspective, it really feels like in the last year, couple years in particular, there's been this boom of just like people talking about exploring your product and being like, oh wow, this is like hotel tech that like doesn't suck. Like this is interesting, right? And so we can talk all about sort of road mapping stuff, things that you guys are working on, and problems that you're interested in solving. But I want to hear the origin story. So talk to us about the idea for Mews. Where did it come from? Where were you when that idea initially sparked? Take us back to that moment.
I think the original moment was So without kind of getting completely into kind of my general life and backstory, but essentially I was presented with an opportunity to make a hotel that I was building kind of completely my own, and I could, and I had a chance to actually kind of design large swathes of it, without going into the plumbing and things like that, but just generally like how it should look, how it should feel, the way that I wanted to kind of set it up also for success. So that was back in Prague, in Czech Republic, where I'm from, despite the accent. And I had this idea that like I wanted you to get, so it was a 60 key hotel, is a
Okay.
60 key hotel, and I wanted every single person that comes in through the door to feel like they're at a five-star hotel, but at the best hotel that you've ever kind of been at, and where it's casual and you feel that you're actually kind of staying with a friend, but like a
Mm,
super, super helpful friend, basically. And I just thought technology should get us to that place. So the original idea for Mews was actually not anything to do with a PMS. It was actually just it was supposed to be a kind of, at first, like a website, where you're going to kind of go in and just personalize your entire stay, basically just say like, this is exactly the kind of experience that I want. And then there was, something which basically, like, we had these weird names, but like the first names for the system were, so it was Mews. There's a whole backstory to that. But then there was the navigator, which was kind of this thing, and the idea behind it was, it was like, I thought that experiences are a little bit like playlists. So I
mm,
thought, like, how can we
mm.
kind of almost create like a Spotify like playlist for your stay in a city? Yeah, so it's not just to stay in a hotel, but like really think about, like, could we think about these kind of itineraries as playlists, basically? And everyone's going to have like a similar start to that playlist, because you kind of want to think about like what's the theme of the hotel, but then they just veer off into all different types of directions and things like that. And so that was like the first part, the kind of the guest part. And then on the other side, there was going to be something that sits above the PMS.
Okay.
That's just this kind of this thing that I call the master. So basically, like, it was supposed to be the master and the navigator, and the master had a subsystem basically to it, which was essentially the PMS. That at first I just thought, like, it's fine, we'll just get some kind of mesh of APIs. And then this was like 2012, and this was like the thing where we were like, oh, we're just going to plug this master into the commander, and then we realized like nothing like that existed. Yeah, so like we now kind of talk about like we were the first PMS with an open API, but the reason why we built that open API was basically because we were like, somebody's going to want to build a master on top
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's really kind of because the master was just like a task system. It was like a smart task system, so that, even though you had the 60 key hotel, so probably, at most you might have 70 or 80 people basically kind of in that hotel at any one time. You want to make it super personalized, basically, but then you won't be able to afford having 70 hosts, doing that. So therefore, you'd need to have some system that was kind of like, a smart task system, so that one person could look after like 10 people at a go, and you can kind of be that kind of distributed host. So that's really how the whole thing started, and it feels like, everything that we've done since basically has just been trying to actually get to that place. So it's like, it still feels like, 12 years in, we're actually not that far into, like, we've done a huge amount. And like, if I knew that it was going to be this difficult to actually build a PMS and build all of these like different subsystems, then I probably would have thought differently about it. But it still kind of comes to this central idea of like, how do you arrive at the city, in a city, and you have maximal convenience factor. So if I want, I can just go straight into my room. I don't need to speak to someone.
Yeah.
If I do want an experience where I do get like a maximum amount of care from a host, like, that's the thing that I kind of want. But I'm allowed to kind of like almost like tune up the convenience or tune up the luxury part of all of these things, basically, in the way that I want. So I'm fully able to kind of have the stay that I want, have the experience that I want as a guest. And, with the caveat that I think that now we kind of think about this as, in an AI assisted world, there's probably going to be some kind of like agent that
Yeah.
actually kind of like tunes that up for you, so you don't have to kind of think about what it is that you want to experience, but somehow it's it's a kind of subsystem of your own identity on that side, and it's a subsystem of what the hotel and the kind of the city or the brand can actually provide on the other side. Sorry, that's very high-minded, but
No,
that's
no,
kind of how my brain works.
I, I love this. This is amazing. And the question that immediately comes to mind and is something that I've been thinking a lot about, right? Is that in hospitality in particular, there exists these nuances where I want personalization. Like when I go to the grocery store, like when I'm like checking out at a Whole Foods, right? Like I want my Prime code to show up, and it's
Yep.
a very transactional experience. That aspect of personalization, like I always expect to be the same. Like when I go and check out, I want my Prime code to pop up, and I want to be able to scan
Yep.
my Prime code. I want to get my groceries, and I want to go home, right? And yet when it comes to
And that
hospitality,
feels like actually crap
it does.
personalization, right? Because
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
you should get, like, if you think about it, basically, like, the way that I think about that is like, I should be paying more for the stuff that, for example, like, is good for me, yeah, versus
Mm,
like less for the stuff that's like bad for me, for example. Like, so the same way that like certain types of like, things get, so it's like things that are going to kind of like make me healthier,
yeah, yeah,
fundamentally, like that's good for society, that's better for my kind of like um like health profile and stuff like that. Like my insurance premium should be tied to that, basically. So like I should get a discount for eating my greens,
yep,
you know
yep, yep,
and it's things like that that I just feel like, even that feels like it's kind of personalization, but the only thing is just it's recognition, yeah,
exactly. It's
as it's
recognition.
kind of,
Yeah,
and it's like it's not, that feels like kind of scratching the surface, and I feel like in hotels we can't even get that right, yeah,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
feels like such a, like, it's such a bummer to like go to a hotel and go like, for example, a hotel that you've been to like 20 times that year, which happens to me all the time because I'm like kind of roadside warrior. And you go there and they're like, "Have you stayed with us before?" And you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"This is
Only a
insane.
dozen
This is
times. Yeah.
2025,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this year." And I feel like that feels like very, very surface level, and that feels also like the kind of stuff that we should just, that should be like automatic. No, like I don't want to like, it's basically no, any system that doesn't allow for that today, that's not a hospitality system for 2025,
Yeah.
basically.
100%. 100%. So, but here's what I want your thoughts on in particular, right? I agree, right? That's table stakes now. Like we need to figure this out. I had a friend the other day that's got status at actually both Marriott and Hilton, and meaningful status at both, and they literally, that no one ever knows who I am. Like, and I go to the same
Yeah,
hotels and I have the top status, and people
yeah,
still don't know who I
yeah,
am, right? And it's like, what is the future of loyalty? And we could go off on a whole tangent
yeah,
there, but here's what's I think different about hospitality versus the Whole Foods experience, an example that I was just giving you. When I go on a trip, when I travel somewhere new, right? There are different personas that I might wish to adopt, right? So like, yes, at home, right? I behave a particular way. I eat a particular set of things. My workout schedule is a particular schedule, right? Like when I travel, if I got, I've got two little kids. So when I travel, I have more free time than I do when I'm at home. So I might actually have
100%.
a time to go for like a long run versus going to a quick workout class or something like that, right? When I travel, with my wife or even with my family, like I actually might want to experiment with something new. Like, hey, like when I'm here, normally like I eat this way and drink this way, but you know what? Let's try this whole wellness thing. Like
Yeah,
maybe I
yeah,
don't want, right, my standard cocktail waiting for me in the room. Maybe I want to try this whole like sober curious thing that everyone's talking. Like, so the added nuance that exists in this sector, which I think is like the biggest opportunity that lays in front of
yeah,
people like yourself, right? Is like, how do you help? And AI, I think, is really like the answer to this. But like, how do you help intuit the kind of experience Zach might actually look for here? It can't truly be personalization because you know how I
yeah,
really am, right? But here, I don't know. I might want to choose my own adventure. I might want the path of the standard path, or I might want to take Zach on a curious journey through a different path that I would never normally go on in my context back at home. React to that. Like, how do you think about this? Like, how do you think about that tension and that opportunity? Because to me, this feels like the most exciting thing this industry has
Yeah,
faced in decades.
like this is really funny because I think that you actually touch upon some of the kind of the fundamental things around how we think about personalization, how we think about identity. Like for example, like I am like every single person contains multitudes, right? Like I'm Richard with my kids, but I'm also Richard with a group of my guy friends.
Yeah.
And I'm also a different Richard, similar one, basically similar in physiognomy and all of these things, but like with my girlfriends,
Yeah.
it's different. I'm also different when I'm together with my wife. Like my eating habits, my there's just like every single person like contains multitudes basically from that. And so any system that's trying to think about personalization has to think about your identity as not just one identity, but it's
Yeah.
actually all of those identities.
Yeah.
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 And I think that that is actually a really like you touch upon like I think one of the things that we always really think about and care about, which is understanding like what are the building blocks of personalities basically. Yeah, because it isn't just you're not static, you're not the
Yeah.
same. Yeah. And then when you kind of think about like I think like it's any like AI has become this kind of catch-all phrase for large data sets that somehow basically like need to be refined,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
and in order to actually or need to kind of interact with other large data sets in order to actually kind of produce an outcome. So I think that when you think about this, like there's lots of like different ways that we've thought about this, which is like could we, for example, and then you think about the other part, which is the fact that most people won't tell you how they're feeling. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Most
Exactly.
people like
Exactly. Yeah.
it's really difficult to actually kind of like get a lot of this information from people when you just ask them, which is why surveys are crap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
why we kind of think about like, okay, how can we actually get this information from someone? Yeah. Without actually needing to ask them. Yeah, because there's a bunch of things that somebody will basically put on their bill that's going to be different to the thing that they filled out. Yeah, as
Yeah.
basically like their preferences. So they might tell you that they basically like really like to eat healthy and stuff like that, but they're just going to order something completely different in a steak restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and so you have to always like factor in these types of things basically into like true personalization. And in hospitality, you have to kind of understand that. And then there's the other aspect of all of that, which is that like we in hospitality have this way of thinking about personal data that I think is actually the way that I eventually all tech companies and all companies will look at it. But I think that like actually the prototype that we have in hospitality, which is this idea of, here's this concierge or here's this hotel manager that knows but doesn't judge.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's the fact that like you've had a long flight, you've had a crappy meeting basically, so you just like you want to go have a hamburger, yeah, and a beer. That doesn't mean like Meta, yeah, or somebody like that would kind of pick that up and go like, great, this is what Richard likes. Like, he spent like a lot of money on these things. Let me like when he wakes up, let me just pepper him with like loads of adverts, yeah, on that. The hospitality perspective is that even if you have this data, you know how to kind of, you understand, you're empathetic to the fact that like, this isn't the Richard that Richard wants to see. This
Hmm.
was Richard in a moment of weakness, yeah, that just wanted to be comforted, that wanted to feel good. But it doesn't mean that the next time basically like that he's thinking about where to go, you recommend like, the kind of the whatever crappy version of McDonald's basically like will be, yeah. It's just like that because that's not how as a human you want to see yourself basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so you do then get into this idea that like, well, personalization should on the one side be about meeting that person where they are, but also about, when you're staying at a hotel, sometimes you are kind of like living a stylized life. You're checking into the life that you would like to live. Yeah. So basically, so you go and stay at a boutique hotel in Paris when you're basically like, on a work trip there or something like that, or you're taking your wife or your partner, and you're like, this is the type of experience that we would like to have, and this is the type of life that we would like to lead if we didn't have to kind of have like these other 363 days of drudgery. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think that that's actually like a really, really powerful thing for, even for example, like thinking about growth in this industry and growth in terms of, really, really understanding like what it is that hospitality means to people. Because like the way that we kind of think about it is like, you have the id, ego, and super ego basically, and it's like to a certain extent like hospitality to a lot of people is that super ego of their lives. It's
Yeah.
like those vacation days are the days that that the reason why you're buying those types of trips and stuff like that is because that you have like a guaranteed memory. Yeah. And if you're creating guaranteed memories, like those are things that become your wealth to most
Mm.
people. It's like the wealth of those experiences. And this is why, like, when you see people, spending like untold amounts of money on the Super Bowl or on, Taylor Swift tickets and stuff like that, it's because they know that actually that's where the real wealth lies.
Mm.
Like a
Mm.
shiny toy or something like that basically will fade, and depreciate basically. But the uniqueness of those memories and of those experiences basically will actually stay for a long time. And that's why it feels that like the inflationary bound on how much an experience can actually kind of go for, and how big, for example, hospitality can be in terms of a percentage of somebody's spending. Yeah, basically it feels like it's boundless.
Yeah.
But like, whereas like for a car or something like that, like you're probably going to budget for that in a way that you just wouldn't for those types of hospitality experiences.
Well, and I
Sorry,
think
that's
a
like
big,
a very, very long
no, no,
answer,
no,
but
no,
like,
no.
but that's the way that I kind of think about it, basically, in terms of, how to think about personalization in hospitality.
Well, and I think all that is awesome, and I couldn't agree more. And then just to build on it too, right? Like it's one of the last frontiers for spontaneity. It's one of the last
Yeah,
frontiers for like genuine human connection, right?
yep,
Meaning we most of the world now meets the people they end up sleeping with, the people they end up marrying, right? One day, the people they end up having kids with on their phone. Like they vet
yeah,
them fully before they ever like meet them in person, right? We live in a world where like literally everything is planned down to a detail, right? Like
yeah,
we're slaves to our calendars. All of our work now happens via a laptop, right, or a phone in many cases. And so, like hospitality in and of itself is truly like one of these like last frontiers for genuine surprise, for
yeah,
genuine delight, for genuine God knows what, fill in the blank, right? And it's also one of the last places where I think you can like genuinely connect with strangers in like a meaningful way. Like everything else is so it's planned, it's thought through ahead of time. It's first
yeah,
discovered and read all about, and then you're matching right the reality with your preconceived notion of what that reality would be or who that person is or could be. And in hotels and travel, right, in these beautiful hospitality experiences that you love, that I love, that I think everyone listening to this conversation loves and is building, these are like sacred spaces because like
yeah,
they really are like the last spaces for I don't know, for true like for true moments of wow, for true
yeah,
moments that to your earlier point will go down as like the memories that ground a
yeah,
life, and that's like a
yeah.
huge responsibility, right?
But I think it's like so exciting, no? I feel
Yeah.
like that's the thing that makes hospitality amazing, because as more and more of the world becomes standardized, that's where you go. It's like, because this is like, for example, the problem that I have with the star system, on
Mm.
things like Uber. I'm like, what is a 5-star Uber ride? Yeah, because fundamentally, like, it's gotten to the place where I know exactly how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we now, like the algorithms have gotten so good at predicting the traffic basically and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, you can have a crappy experience if you're watching the map and the guy basically like takes a wrong turn or something like that. You'll like give him 1 star because he like missed the turn or something. But like fundamentally, like, exactly when you're getting there. You know exactly what the experience is going to be like. All of the cars are fundamentally the same. You know that like it's just very, very standardized, and it's good. Like it's actually like you kind of want that. Like in an Uber, like
Yeah.
it's not that you want surprise, you know, as part of it. Like actually, the thing that you're buying is that I want to get from point A to point B in 24 minutes.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
23, great. But I'm not gonna give you 5 stars because you basically like somehow surprised me with like half a minute that you've shaved off because you kind of like slightly accelerated at the end. Yeah. It's just like it's a thing, and it's like it's good, and it's good that it has that kind of you know
Reliability. Yeah.
sameness,
Yeah.
reliability to it, basically. And that's kind of how we want the world. We want the world to be reliable, but that's not memorable. If I
Mm.
ask you basically like what happened on your last Uber trip, like you have no idea, yeah, because it just all fades into the background. It's like I don't know if it was that Uber trip or basically like the one, and the thing that your memory will do, yeah, is that you'll go, okay, well, where was I? And you go, okay, well, I met this person, therefore, oh yeah, I took the Uber on my way to this person. And that's why like hospitality is so much about humans, because you remember the human who gave you that service. You remember the human that you met. You remember the spontaneity, basically, of all of those things, either because it's a vista or some kind of like experience that you had. But the reason why, basically, like all of those photos that people take, where it's just like, here is a picture of, you know, a view, are so boring, yeah,
Yeah.
because nobody cares.
Yeah.
If there's an interesting person there, then you care. Yeah, if it's just a vista, it's just like at this point it's just a screensaver basically that we all have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so nobody cares. And so I think that that's why like hospitality is where the magic still happens. Yeah. And where why it's become, you know, people are like, oh my God, like, isn't it amazing how much money we're now basically making through, you know, Taylor Swift concerts and stuff like that? It's like, yeah, because this is the only part that is now actually exciting for people, because everything else is kind of pre-planned to the standard, to the level, to that level of convenience. Yeah, and basically, like, yes, you might get a crappy like review if that convenience isn't met. But fundamentally, even that data point of basically saying like the convenience wasn't met is not an interesting data point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
just because everything else is just basically like just a normal 5 star review, basically for the fact that like I got from point A to point B in an acceptable amount of time.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That's a really good one. I want to drill in a little deeper and maybe a little bit more tactical here and get your thoughts on a couple things. So for a while, right? And you probably know this better than I do, but I'd say for the last at least decade, right? You've seen sort of this doubling down on investment in design, in you know boutique hotels, in this idea of like even if it's a you've seen all the major flags, right? They're launching collection after collection, brand after brand, trying to, you know, essentially, I think, like trick the consumer to make you think that this is a really special hotel, but it's really a curio hotel, right? Or it's really part of the autograph collection. And, you
Yeah.
know, Big Daddy still owns, you know, a chunk of that pie. And so obviously there's been major investment here. There's been major investment in sort of the experiential design aspect of these properties. I think it's interesting, right? That you haven't seen, and maybe you disagree, and you know, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, which is why I'm excited to get your answer to this question. We haven't seen sort of like a doubling down or a tripling down of investment in sort of like the tech enablement experience that is associated with that, right? So like you go into these incredible remark. It seems like every other day there's like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
incredible hotel that's opening up. It's been, I mean, millions and millions of dollars poured into these places to make them like look and feel and smell a very specific way, right? They might only be 60 keys too. Like these are not necessarily all like massive projects, right? And then you get an email from them, right, on on the day of check-in, and like the email looks like it was like is a constant contact, you know, template from like, you know, the early 2000s or something like that, right? They still don't have sort of like a truly like tech enabled experience while you're on property. Now, is that all really just like by design? Is it like is it an excuse like, oh hey, we like, you know, actually no, we don't want people using their phones. We don't want push notifications being sent to folks inviting them to an experience that's happening in the lobby right now. Like we that's not what we do to our guests. Like, is it all by design? Is it being lazy, or is it really sort of a huge blind spot that people are just not even like thinking enough about, especially with respect to like the investment required to truly not just personalize like the human like in-person experience, but the virtual experience that all of us have, by the way, in conjunction with, in partnership with that human experience at the property. How do you think about that? How do you think about sort of like why we are where we are, if you even agree that we're in the place that I think we're in?
I actually completely agree with you. And I think that one of the biggest reasons for that, I think like, as in running a tech company, like one of the things that you always, there's like all of these laws and I'm not sure if it's like Cunningham's law or like one of these laws basically, but it's like the thing that you measure will be the thing that thing is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I feel like that's the biggest problem with our industry is that we keep talking about RevPAR
mm,
and not like Rev, and I don't know what name it would be, but RevPAG. Yeah. Basically, like the thing that we're selling is services to guests, and how it feels and the way that people talk about things is basically like we're trying to measure average room rate.
yeah,
Yeah. And we always kind of have this like mental model of like, a stay at a property is the best way to kind of think about it is like here's here's basically like a number of kind of like clocks. Yeah. And for most people, they need 8 hours, give or take, to sleep in a bed.
yeah,
Yeah. And they kind of like the reason why you'd spend that much money on a hotel room is because like you value that part like quite a lot. Like that that's like you're going to be unconscious, you need to be safe. You need to be in a place that's comfortable because you're usually traveling to that place to do something else basically. Like the sleep part is the thing that gets you ready for it. So why
yeah,
would you put yourself in danger basically? Or why would you put yourself in a place that like you feel uncomfortable? So therefore, like you're willing to part ways with an amount of money. If you're traveling with your kids, for example, you want them to be safe, you want them to be comfortable, you want them to feel at home, even though they're not going to be at home.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you actually will spend a huge amount on that. But that's only like a third of that day's experience. So if you're there for like 72 hours, yeah, then that's just still like a tiny part. So
yeah.
yes, you will spend a lot of money on that, but that's not the whole thing. And I think if we kind of like the way that we should be looking at that is like that is the minimum.
Mm,
That is like the thing that we start off with. Yeah. So if we're trying to think about the service that we're providing to that guest, we should think about like, okay, is that, is those are those 8 hours being valued in the way that the perception of that value was at first? So for example, like, do they feel comfortable? Do they feel safe? Is there like enough, like, enough of a noise canceling situation, basically, like, are there police sirens outside basically so that like, so that the kids, uh, you know, might feel, you know, like that they're not at home and stuff
yeah,
like that. Like,
yeah,
and I think that like we should think about, that's the part that pertains to the Rev Par. Yeah, but what about the others? What about the 16 hours of experience basically outside of that? And currently in hotels, we don't measure that. Yeah, we
mm,
don't measure that in terms of, we put it as like ancillary revenue. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, it's something extra. Yeah. And the only thing that we should measure is just this. And I just think like, it's a shame because
Mm,
actually like the 16 hours of experience basically that comes on top of the 8, that's something where you have a total right, yeah, to at least be either super helpful with that, yeah, or to decide that actually you don't want to take a part in that as well, yeah, and so therefore you just want to be maximally convenient. Like we always think about the perspective of like a 1-star experience or a 1-star hotel is a hotel that caters and should cater really, really well to that kind of, I want to get you to the room as quickly as possible. Yeah. And basically like for you to have a good time in the room, for you to basically like find a good bed. Yeah, but that's like a 1-star experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of 5-star experience is when you've built lots of the different amenities basically in a way that that can then facilitate, let's say, a 16 hours of experience in a really good way. So you have the gym that is exactly the right kind of gym. You have the bar that's exactly the right kind of bar. You have the restaurant that's exactly to the taste. But also, like, hotels have invented like the concierge, which
Yeah.
actually manages that experience from the perspective of like, the design checks out basically. And then kind of goes like, okay, this person who's staying here would also like to experience these things basically in the city. Yeah. And once you start kind of thinking about it from that perspective, you see that the amount that the person spends on the hotel room, that should be just the kind of the minimum that we should be expecting to kind of to make from that guest. And if
Mm.
instead of basically having like RevPAR targets or ADR targets, we actually start having RevPAG targets, I think it would fundamentally change the way that we think about the types of people that we employ, the jobs that we give them, the way that we use technology, and the way that we actually kind of think about how this whole concert actually kind of comes together. And we would think about like, who do we employ? Who do we give the most amount of money to in the hotel? Like, should it
Yeah.
be the revenue manager?
Yeah.
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 Or should it be basically like the guest experience manager?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, like, because where are you going to be actually making more of that incremental money? Yeah, and that's where, like, for example, like, especially like technology and AI can come in because so for example, like we have an automated revenue management system, yeah, that like might not be the greatest individual revenue manager on the planet, but does that mean basically that like now instead of paying somebody, a huge wage basically there, you're actually paying a kind of, a SaaS fee for that so that
Yep.
you can actually go and spend it instead on somebody who's like the greatest concierge of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then thinking about like, well, do I need that person for all the, hours of the day? Could it be that I get actually kind of like 10 concierges, yeah, who are actually paid on the commission basically like from these outsized, experiences and things like that, yeah, or from, functioning as a quasi, personal assistant. Yeah. And I think that's where I get really, really excited about like, can the baseline of experience basically, or the baseline of kind of what the services that we provide as hoteliers, can that be technology? And can we
Yeah.
basically then have people that really, really think about, how to actually extract the most amount of value from the 16 hours that we're currently not really catering to?
I I absolutely love that perspective and think that that is the conversation that needs to be had right now. And just to clarify, Richard, too, for listeners, when you say RevPAG, is the G guest? Is that
Guest. Sorry.
guest?
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
revenue per average guest.
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes. Okay,
basically like
that's
it's
what I
also the
assumed. I just wanted
thing
to
of
make
like, yeah, like this
confirm.
is why like in Mews, like it's a very boring architectural thing, but like we want to make sure that you're not posting to rooms, that you're posting to guests. Because it's the same
Mm,
thing. Like me and my wife, we might be a family, but we're two separate people basically. We have two separate kind of like preferences and stuff like that. So even though it might go on my bill, I still want the hotel or the brand to know that it was my wife who ordered it. Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
me that basically like ordered it. So therefore, that kind of the idea of posting it basically to these like to these folios basically, which is just like room folios, just makes no sense. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
again like basically if you care about the rev par numbers, you'd put it there. If you care about basically like the relationship that you have with that guest, the information that you have about that guest, and you're trying to track that guest basically over a much, much longer period of time, yeah, like especially in a brand perspective, you have to know like the individual orders that that guest has actually kind of made. Yeah, you
yeah.
have to know as much as you possibly can. And again, if you're just posting that to like some kind of anonymous folio, yeah, like you're never going to get to that piece of information.
What's really interesting about this just train of thought too is I was recently talking to a friend who's got a small boutique hotel, and obviously everyone in the industry talks about their love-hate relationship, mostly hate relationship with OTAs. And it was funny because I was talking to him, and he's a sample size of one, but I'm curious if this is actually more common than we think. And he was remarking that they recently were diving into their OTA guests, and they were surprised to learn that like a significant portion of their Expedia bookings, for example, actually spent way more on site
Yeah.
than their direct
Yeah.
bookings because and he's like, and I don't know this definitively, but like logically, you're like, well, maybe if I scored as a consumer a better rate, right, or some sort of promo, or I could use my one key cash or whatever it is for the actual room, then I have a much larger likelihood to spend at the bar and spend at the restaurant and not feel bad about it because I got such a good deal or whatever on the
Yeah.
room. And so it was funny because like his remark was like, wow, for like the last several years we've been just so focused on like direct bookings and like, oh God, like we need to move that percentage up, and oh my gosh, we're losing all the OTAs are the enemy, and yada yada yada. And in like their analysis, what they learned is actually like, right, if you look at total revenue per guest, our OTA guests, right, in many cases outspend in the aggregate from taking into consideration obviously the take and the commission of the OTA. They actually spend more, or we net more. And
Yeah.
that was like such a, again, sample size of one, right, like small hotel, but like a very interesting just thought experiment. And like I think an encouragement for everyone listening to this, like, hey, like just because the assumption out there right now is like, hey, do everything that you can to increase direct bookings. Now I think that that's what you should be doing, and like you want to own your guest data, and there's all these other complicated factors as well that are worth prioritizing. However, the assumption that like it's just a more valuable guest is not necessarily true, um
Yeah.
which is just such a fun story.
But I think like this is like genuinely the biggest problem that we have in the industry
Mm,
is that like, and it's actually a huge problem from the OTAs as well. Like I think that they're part of the problem here, yeah, because
mm,
even the way that they like, they'll be like, oh, because of security, we're not going to show you like this guest like email address. It's like yeah, like sure, like but what? Like I'm just supposed to basically like not ask them for an email address? Like, and it's just like, so you're now going to make it really difficult for me. For why? Because implicitly you're basically saying that the 23%, the 18%, the 15%, whatever it is that like is just too much.
yeah,
So
yeah,
therefore you're implicitly saying, I need to screw you somehow out of this like relationship. I don't want to give you all of this information because I want to keep it for myself so that
yeah,
when that person comes next, they're not going to come to me because I give an absolutely fantastic service. Yeah. They're going to come to me because they're somehow captive.
yeah,
Yeah. And I've captured this guest and they're mine. Yeah. And I'm going to lend them to you, but they're fundamental. Like, don't you ever forget that they're just on loan. Yeah. And if that's like, I'm like, why don't you just share this information? Like, why don't you share the email address, but also share like that this person likes to travel,
mm,
share that
yeah,
they've been to like 15 other places, basically. Like, like what exactly is going to be wrong with the hotel making more money through having more access to the information about this guest?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then like, yeah, sure. Like there's a possibility that they might own this guest, therefore, like henceforth. Yeah. But like, surely that's going to be like a good thing. Yeah. That
yeah,
like you've driven this guest basically. So therefore, like it's the reason why hoteliers hate the OTAs. Yeah. Is because they make them feel that like anyone who comes, yeah, is just like that they haven't really like chosen that hotel on its merits. It's
mm,
somehow because basically like that guest is too stupid to actually make that decision themselves. And it's like, and it's this like negative reading that we have as an industry of every single other counterparty. And it infects basically like all the tech providers as well. Like I'm super happy that like now like I feel like we've driven this whole like open API revolution, and it's still not open, and it's still like whenever you go to like all of our competitors, they'll be like, oh yeah, of course it's open, but therefore like we need to charge these fees and do these
yeah,
things, and
yeah,
like but everyone has this like whole thing that like no, we must protect, yeah, and if you own someone, you own them totally, and
yeah,
we're just going to lend them to you, yeah, and it's just I just think like again, that's a kind of beggar thy neighbor
Mm,
mentality. Yeah.
mm,
And I just think like we would all be better off if we had this kind of mindset of like, okay, let's make it interoperable. Let's make sure that like we're actually focusing on like what is the best thing for the guest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And if it means basically that like that guest is going to have a better time because they're going to be paying less, and we both have to kind of like, I have to drop my rates but you have to drop your commission, yeah, to make sure that this guest basically is somebody who likes us, for the future. I think that that's better because like you're thinking about it from the perspective of like what's the customer lifetime value,
yeah.
yeah, rather than like what is the single transaction where I can make the most amount of money basically off that single transaction. Because you know what, like this person won't ever appear basically like in my CRM again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I also just wonder, like, I was talking to some actually execs at Expedia. They had an event. It was really focused on their vacation rental management clients, so their Verbo brand, obviously. But what was interesting about my conversations with their like chief commercial officer and GM of Verbo is I was kind of pushing them on this in particular because I was like, guys, like, especially for professional operators, and again, this was where this was specifically for vacation rental management companies who, the hotels probably hate the OTAs. I think the VRMs probably hate them even more. And there's like
But
true
it's
like
weird. Like
animosity.
why?
It,
Like
it is
why
weird.
would
It is
you
weird.
why would you hate somebody who's bringing you
A
basically
ton
like
of business. A
a
ton of
ton of
business.
business, basically
Yeah.
like doing it better? Like this is the thing that I hate about like the whole like, direct booking thing. It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. You like these, the reason why these OTAs exist is because they're really, really good at the performance marketing. Yeah,
Exactly.
like
Exactly. Yeah.
why, like when we're talking about direct booking, we should talk about it as less able performance marketing, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But like
Yep.
just call it for what it is. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. But what was interesting about what the GM of Verbo told me, and he told me this offline. But like basically his because I asked him at point blank actually in our interview, I was like, so here's what I don't understand. Like once I book with the property, right? Why not share some information about the guest with me? Like I'm going to come to this vacation home, right? Like this is where I'm going to be staying. What is and I asked him, I was like, what is the actual like likelihood that Zach rebooks this exact home on Verbo again? Right? Like, and he was like, it's like literally single digit percentages. I was
yeah,
like, yeah, well, that's what I would expect. And I'm like, look, you want a huge win with these operators. Like, cool. Keep the guests up until the keep the inquiries, like keep all that, right? But like once I've booked a stay with this property, like give them my actual phone number and my actual email address, and then yeah, maybe even a couple indicators of like what I might be interested in. Like maybe say, hey, Zach's booked your home for the first time. He's also stayed at several Ritz Carltons in the last 2 years.
yeah.
Just something like that. They have through the Expedia, they have access to all that data, right? Like they know, and as an operator, that then changes, potentially, right, depending on my respect for the Ritz Carlton, how I might like service Zach, like what hospitality you might give him. And that's a super low friction, like that's
Yeah.
that makes me want more Verbo bookings, right? Because that's not data
A
I have
hun-
on my own.
a
So it's just
hundred percent.
shocking.
And it's
Yeah.
like, and the other thing is as well, I feel it's like really, really like so like low-minded of
Yeah.
Verbo, because it's like you're basically like you're doing so much to bring that customer, but then that customer
Yeah.
actually lives in that experience. Basically, they could, if that property is in like incentivized to share back the information that that person actually does on site, you could get
Yeah.
like live feedback, yeah,
Yeah.
to basically like, was this the right place for that person to have booked? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they actually like, are they enjoying themselves? Are they having a good time? What are they spending on? What is the next thing? Like they all talk about like this connected trip, and it's again basically like we're gonna squirrel away, yeah, like this person, so that they know that they are our person, basically,
Yeah.
yeah? And like they're connected, but only through the one key, yeah. And we're like, oh my God, like
But what's
there is
funny
an
is like,
actual service provider
yeah,
that could
exactly.
be making like giving you so much great information about this person, basically, like while they're on site. Like, what's the fear?
Yeah. Well, and to that point, they still have all of my information. It's not like Vrbo cannot remarket to me. It's not like
Yes.
I'm never going to get an email from Vrbo. And guess what? Who's a more sophisticated marketer? Mom and pop, like vacation rental management company, or freaking
100%.
Expedia, right? And
A
so it's like
100%.
they don't lose. Literally, they lose nothing. Like
Yeah.
and the only gain, and actually, like I bet you, right? And I'm sure they're thinking about this right now, but I bet you, right? What we're gonna see is, hey, you want to pay an extra 2-3%? Well, if you pay an extra 2-3%, here's everything that we're gonna give you. The number of operators that would immediately opt into something like
Everyone.
that is
Yeah.
it's crazy. And so it's like, great, just figure out your economics, like make it pencil for you.
Yeah.
But what's the big risk in giving us this info? Anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I think these are the kinds of questions that I think we're living in probably the most exciting like technological age, at least of like our lifetimes. And so these are the kinds of problems I think that can now be solved in relatively like, easily. And maybe like the argument before was like it was just too hard to do, but like at the same time,
Yeah.
you're now individual owner and operators are actually empowered with a lot of these tools that historically they haven't been enabled to use. Everything these AI models allow us to do, right, turns anyone who spends enough time doing something into a quote unquote expert. And so like
Yeah.
it's just an exciting time to be able to like have these conversations, to experiment. And I think like if operators aren't already thinking about like what is the solution for not just an incredible guest experience being kind of the physical experience, but an incredible tech-enabled,
Yeah.
accompanied experience,
Yeah.
if you will, that has to be the focus.
100%. And I think like all of this has to come with this perspective of like interoperability. Yeah, it's
Mm,
like this is the kind of the stupidest thing about Airbnb, like trying to create all these different experiences and stuff like that. You know what? Like some of those experiences basically like might come out of your network.
yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not just going to get every single massage therapist basically in like Piacenza. Yeah. Like it just won't happen. Some of them will just be on Google because actually like they've only been on Google for the last 5 years and they're still struggling with like technology. So just make it easy for them to actually kind of like add in those things. And if you have that information, yeah, like it'll be great. Like then you can go and contact that person. The next time, that's actually going to be a service that's going to be bookable by other people. But
Yeah.
this idea that like you have to lock these people in to like, ecosystems that just live on their own. Yeah, it's just completely antithetical to what hospitality, yeah, actually is. And I think like to your point, like we now have so much technology. Yeah, like let's keep it open. Let's basically like let's make sure that like we're focusing on the right things. Yeah. The
Yeah.
right thing should not be how much are we making per this one transaction. Yeah. But what's the total bucket of that stay? Yeah. And basically like and how well has that actually kind of lined up with the expectations of this person? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
ultimately we should be measuring like and the way that we should think about our KPIs is like, was this trip memorable? Yeah. Did this person have a great time? Because like the thing is like we're all in this whole ecosystem of travel towards this like very, very beautiful thing, which is like
Mm,
that we exist to make people feel good and we get
mm,
paid for that. And that is
mm.
such an amazing job. And like I feel like we all keep on making it harder for ourselves because we're like, no, no, no. If they basically somehow stray from the one path that we've given them, yeah, this house is just going to collapse onto itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, well, so well said, Richard. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I love the way that you think. I love the way that you are experimenting. I am just super impressed by the product you guys are building at Mews. I know that you guys are very highly respected, obviously, in the industry. Anytime I
Probably less
hear
so after this phone, after this conversation.
no, but thank you for making the time. Thank you for all the great work that you and the team are doing, and for anyone who's tuning into this conversation that doesn't know about Mews or wants to go explore Mews further, I'll have links in the show notes below. I'll also have links to Richard's LinkedIn, so you can go and connect with him as well. Thank you so much for the time, man. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@journey.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@journey.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at journey.com/alliance. Again, that's journey.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.